At number 4, I have Operation Barclay. So this is a 2-player only, kind of a poker adjacent deduction style game based on Operation Barclay, of course, and Operation Mincemeat. So basically, during World War II, one player is going to represent the Axis, one's going to be the Allies, and it's going to be for the Axis to try and work out where they can land safely in Europe. And where if you are the Allies player, you're trying to prevent the Axis player from getting that information. And the way you do that mechanically is through playing poker cards and building poker hands. So you're going to simply have a hand of 4 cards. You're going to be playing them out, trying to build your standard fare of poker hands, building pairs, 3 of a kind, full houses, and the like. But there are a few additional twists here. Now, for example, the cards do have some special abilities that let you kind of tinker with the cards you have or swap these tokens around, which will determine which locations you have access to. And also, after you've played the first 3 cards in player order, then you will actually have the opportunity to wager on who you think will have the strongest poker hand. So even if you're doing quite poorly, you might bet on your opponent doing better than you can and still do well that way instead. And once you've played your first 3 cards and you've bet on who you think's got the strongest hand, then you'll play 2 more cards face down to muddy the waters that little bit more. After you've played all your cards, both sets of cards will be revealed. Whoever's built the strongest poker hand will gain access to certain tile locations, which will mean that if you are the attacking player, you can flip some tiles over and try and work out where you can successfully land. Then you'll go on to who wagered correctly on who had the strongest hand. And again, if you bet uniquely correctly, you'll get access to all of those tokens. If you've both bet correctly, then you'll have 1 each. And the final token you can get hold of is based on these little boat and plane symbols that you're collecting when you are playing these cards. So you're kind of working out 3 things to get access to these deduction tokens to work out where you can actually successfully land if you are the Axis player. Or, of course, all you're trying to do as the Allies player is prevent your opponent from getting those tokens and working out where those hit locations are going to be. So, it's pretty standard fare mechanically, at least in terms of the card play. But I do like that additional twist of wagering on who you think is going to do better. I tend to like that, and it seems to be a nice way to iron out the luck of the card draw, because even if you're doing badly, you can bet that your opponent's doing better and do well that way instead. So you do always have kind of a plan B to get around here. And I think the game is actually really well done in terms of its tempo and game arc, because it seems to be perfectly balanced of, if you're fighting on level footing, probably by the last turn, after 6 rounds, that's going to be where you're going to really have to try and win and get those final few tokens flipped over. So, the game is fine. Again, I really like the theme and the setting. It's a really interesting time in history and a particular kind of point in the war that I'm particularly fascinated with. But I think the gameplay was a little bit flat, maybe a little bit repetitive. And despite me again liking the concept, I think there are other games that did this better, and I'd rather play some other games where you're building poker hands, games like The Gang, or several other card games like shedding games, etc. So this one I thought was slightly too long, and again a little bit too bland in the mechanisms, despite being wrapped up in a really nice theme. So I can't really recommend it for that reason. That is Operation Barclay at number 4.